Hello, welcome to David Eames On Your Mind, a conversation between friends about mental health issues. Hello, and welcome to the David Eames On Your Mind podcast. As usual, I'm joined by the lovely Mikey Markham and Owen Oxley. Today we're going to talk about public speaking, which for some people is a really terrifying prospect. Not so much for you, Owen. In my experience, that you'll give a speech at the opening of an envelope. So was there a time ever you were frightened of doing it?
Not that I can think of.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I've ever... I don't know. It's always been, let them have you. And I think from being a kid, I used to love dancing. And I would, any wedding, for whatever reason, when I was really small, there were so many weddings that we would be at every week. Mm-hmm. And I would love dancing. So I'd always be on the dance floor and I'd get quite a lot of attention because I would dance really. I used to dance like Michael Jackson. I'd copy a lot of his moves. So I'd get loads of people giving me a lot of confidence, saying, oh, that's amazing, and all the rest of it. So because I always felt like I had everyone's support, it kind of carried over. And then one particular day, we were at a wedding with my dad, and he said, we've got to leave this wedding to go to another wedding quickly, but just to show our face and then come back. And there just so happened to be another one of me at this other wedding, dancing, because obviously it's the 80s, so everyone was dancing like Michael Jackson. So I was stood with him.
I wasn't.
Of course, I've seen you do it.
Oh.
I've seen you do a mean moonwalk.
And I look like the moon.
Exactly. So my dad nudged me, and he went, let him have you. And I went, what? He went, just let him have you. And he sort of ushered me in. And it wasn't that I was nervous of doing it, but I kind of didn't want to restart the whole process again when I've already got this other group we were going back to that were like, I'm already in there. So I did, and then it turned out to be wicked again. So I don't know if it was that, just because it's like, what's the worst that can happen? Mm-hmm. And ever since...
Can I ask another question? Because you come across really confident.
Yeah.
What else do you attest or attribute to your confidence? Do you link it to childhood much, or how you were raised?
I don't know. I think it's strange because obviously my parents divorced when I was 4. And it was a weird one because then I've got 2 families and it's like nothing was really super secure and we didn't have a great deal of everything sort of growing up. But I could always make people laugh, either by being a twat or just with jokes or acting stupid. Or I always found that I could do accents really well, and like I'd only have to watch a film once or twice to remember the entire thing. Can't remember my times table, can't remember important stuff, but I watched Dumb and Dumber and remembered the whole script after like 2 times. So because I could make people laugh, there was never really any danger of me embarrassing myself, because if it was ever going sideways, I could always pull something out the bag to sort of go, oh, waka waka.
And if you can kick off with a laugh, it's a lot easier.
Yeah,
isn't
big
it?
time. I mean, I can remember doing Paul's mum's funeral, and I'm still not over it. I'm definitely still not over it. I'm still not over the fact that she's not with us anymore. It breaks me in half to think about it. But when she passed away, I'd said to the family, or I said to Paul, because me and Paul are really close, and I'd said, dude, who's doing the eulogy? And he went, I can't do that. Oh, what do you mean you can't do that? And he's really confident. And he's really, but it's obviously his mum, so it's a big difference. And he went, no, I can't do that, Mocha. I went, no, I'll do it. He went, you sure? And I was like, without a doubt, it would be an absolute honour. And he was like, if you would want to. And I was like, knowing Nikki the way I do, I know that she would rather me do it than some stranger and just rip the piss out of her. And I should have actually been in Vegas that weekend. So the weekend that the funeral was, I should have been in Vegas watching Conor McGregor's comeback fight, and I would have been backstage. It would have been massive.
Oh, mate.
So I started off by walking over to the casket and knocking on it and going, cheers, Nick. I should be in Vegas now. And it kind of just broke everyone down enough for him to go, oh, we're going that angle. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think if she was with us, she'd have wanted it more. Do you know what I mean? You don't need the soppiness. She didn't want all the schmonz.
But you relieve the pressure from your audience
there,
who are terrified that you're going to screw up doing the eulogy.
Yeah.
You know, that's often, I think, where a lot of the fear comes from.
Yeah.
We're picking it up from the audience. What about you, Mikey? You do a lot of public speaking these days. to smaller or even very large groups. Was there a time when you found it terrifying? Do you still find it terrifying?
Do you know what? There's two reasons when I started to find it terrifying. Because, first of all, I was just going up and telling my story at schools and to often teachers, because it was a friend of mine, Martin Illingworth, that got me in, and he's senior head lecturer at Sheffield Hallam. And he'd just seen me performing, do my poetry at a night and a gig. And he was like, mate, I loved what you just did. Can you come in and speak to my NQTs, they're newly qualified teachers? So I went in there and I was doing it for free to start off. And that's fine. I'm sort of there having a really good time, saying my experience and what I know. But then as I joined a company called Independent Thinking, my first time I went on a stage, and it's probably to about 300-400, I was fine with that, but then I started going, they're like, we have to pay you now. And the money was good, like really good for keynote speaks. And as soon as I started putting a price tag on it, that just caught me off guard. I was like, oh my God, I've got to do a really good job now. And I started going up and just, overselling it a little bit for myself and making it a thing. Yeah. And then the other thing that happened to me in my time, as we've spoke on this podcast before and on the radio, like when I was going through my tricky patch, I dabbled in lots of substances, lots of times, and that gave me psychosis eventually. And there was really ironically, at the Happiness Festival, which is in front of, so it was one stage and 1,500 people all in front of you that just fade into the background. And I was on there, and again, I'd built it up, and suddenly I went into a psychosis moment. I was triggered by something, and it just switched on. And everybody's face, they are looking at you because you're the one talking, but they weren't liking it. And the faces were warped and everything. And it was terrifying. It was a horrible experience. And in my head after that, I'd put myself off public speaking for a while because I saw everyone laughing at me and all these terrible things. But the thing that I've met somebody who's a good friend and also doesn't do counselling, but sort of in Dan James kind of world. And he said, what actually happened now? And I was like, well, trying to make it sound to be the worst thing possible. He's like, no, what actually? And we broke it down, and I was basically really just stood there sweating a little bit, looking maybe a bit confused, and then went. So it wasn't as bad as I put on. Yeah. And then, I've gone back into it, and I feel good about it now. I'm in a really good space. Yeah. So it took a whirlwind, though. It took Yeah.
Well, for some people, it feels like it's impossible. There's no way, they say, there's no way I can get up there and talk to people about it. It's a terrifying prospect. There are certainly times when I've been more frightened than others. I don't think whenever I do public speaking, I'm completely free of nerves. Yeah. And I embrace that because I think it's really useful. I feel like it's sharpening me up. A bit of adrenaline in the system. Yeah. Could probably only help, because I think if you're entirely devoid of any sort of nerves, you're quite likely to be boring.
Yeah. I've been on there like that before. Yeah. I've got this, I know exactly what I'm saying. And the nerves started to happen on stage because I realised it was really flat and the energy wasn't there, and that was picking up in the audience. I could feel that. So then the nerves started to come from that. Yeah,
I think the most frightening things I've done is when it's been a specific role, is that standing in for my dad when my sister got married, because my father was dead by then, and giving the father of the bride speech. Yeah. That I couldn't eat the dinner. Yeah. I was so terrified doing that, and it landed really well. It went really well. Good? Yeah, I scripted it, and written a nice big print script in front of me, so I knew exactly what I was going to say.
What angle did you go?
The groom was a big football fan, so I just started off with, I'm here in my number 12 shirt. And conscious of not wanting to screw up as a substitute. And it was quite emotional, just a bit soft, not very long speech at all. The other thing that has been scary in the past is, I was a lay minister in the Church of England for a while. Delivering my first sermon was a bit scary. Well, it was absolutely terrifying. I'd been practicing in front of my wife for quite a while. She got a bit bored with it. So I think what I'm trying to say is the fact that it's scary doesn't mean you don't have to do it. Now, I think Owen at an early age found that he could do it.
Yeah.
Now, it's like you never learn to swim. You learn you don't have to drown.
Yeah.
Because it's the fear you're going to drown stops you swimming. If you realise that you can float, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Riding a bike, you don't really learn to ride a bike. You just learn that you don't have to fall off it. Because the gyroscopic effect will keep it upright, but you think, I can't possibly balance on that until you do it. You, at an early age, got up and performed, both of you, and you were able to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key. The only way of learning how to do it is by doing it, like so many things.
That's where I suffer far more if there's a plan.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's... So many people like to plan stuff and know exactly what's going to happen and script something and all the rest of it.
Yeah, so you'd be deathly with a script then.
Well, this is what I was going to say. I understand that, and I understand that certain people's processes, and I use the term winging it quite loosely because, like when I was best man for Sam, so he was my best man, and he was petrified. And if it was anyone else, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have done it. Like I've been best man for someone else. For my other friend, that we weren't that close, but his brother was that scared of doing a speech, he was like, don't want to do it. So I was like fourth down the list because by the time he'd asked people that mattered to him, he was like, dude, are you all right to do this? I was like, of course I will. But what happened was, we basically, like Sam was my best man for many years before he got married. And he basically, he said to me, yeah, can you do it? I was like, of course I will. So for about a week before, everyone was saying to me, what are you going to say? I was like, I don't know. I mean, I've known the guy since I was 2. We're 42 now. So this was like 10 years ago. So we had plenty of stories. Loads of shit that was dead risky that I probably couldn't say, depending on the audience. And loads of other stuff that was easy to just pluck out the air. But when we got to the service, we were actually about 20 minutes early. So because I was just sat there on my own, I started writing notes. Because so many people had said, what are you going to say? What's these points? What's that? And I was like... Every time I'd said the speech to myself or thought about what I was going to say on the dog walk, it could have been kind of different. But even, like, there was the same spots, but different stories or whatever. And I started writing these notes. Then I felt nervous, and I was like, what the hell am I doing? So I literally I deleted the note. And then I started talking to other people, and then when it came to, turned out it was his dad's birthday that day. The microphone had stopped working and was broken, and... loads of other stuff. So I basically went, right, and I just got up off my seat and went, right, you lot, Sam wants to think this is his day, but forget him. It's actually his dad's birthday. Can we sing Dave happy birthday? And do it in Scottish, because he is Scottish, please. So then made everyone sing to Dave while I'm trying to frantically sort this microphone out. But at the same time, I thought, you can fucking hear me. It doesn't matter. So like, I picked the microphone up, and I was like, right, I'm going to hold this for show. And it was cutting in and out. And I was like, I'll hold this for show, but... As we know, Sam's good with technology. He's not good with microphones, so that's not going to work. And it was a case of I couldn't overthink it, but I think the more that you make people aware, like even if it's the first time you're doing it and you're addressing, I don't know, a university or whatever, and you can go, I'm a bit scared about doing this. The minute you make yourself human, it's really difficult for me to pass judgment because I don't mind. Whereas it's like with Stace, with my wife, she wouldn't like to ring to order a pizza.
Yeah.
That bothers her. But it's so difficult because for her, she doesn't understand how I find it. But it's even more difficult because I don't understand how she feels. So to try and understand each other, it's like
alien language.
You're just ringing for a pizza, and where it's like for me, it's like you're just talking in front of 1,000 people. I'm like, yeah, so what? They're going to listen. And it's, I don't know, it's...
Well, it works sometimes, like, in a previous podcast we talked about phobias. It's the same thing, it's a conditioned response.
Yeah.
People have conditioned themselves, or maybe sometimes circumstances have conditioned them, that their internal threat mechanism is saying, don't go there because you'll die. Yeah. That's why comics talk about dying on stage, because that's kind of what it feels like.
Dying on your arse, yeah.
And especially with comedy, you're either laughing or you're not.
Yeah.
And they get the sound to it. If I'm going and performing a poem or you're doing a public speaking event, sometimes you're looking at a person in the audience, you're like, they absolutely hated it. And then they come up to you after and they're like, that is one of the most important things I've ever heard in my life. You're like, what?
Yeah,
but with comedy, absolutely, that's a real response in front of you. One thing you mentioned there about you can be nervous, just through my experience and some advice I got was, mate, don't let your audience know that from the off, because I've been on the stage before, and as when I came off, the guy who watched me just said, mate, you were fine, you were wicked. Why did you get up there and go, just to let you know, I'm feeling a bit nervous about this? Because then they all tense up and they're like, oh no, it's going to be
which
awkward.
is a key thing, is that people assume that other people can tell what they're feeling, and they haven't got a clue. They have no clue at all that what's going on for you internally, unless you tell people, or collapse in a faint. That would kind of give it away.
Yeah,
just say that you're confident. Just say that you're nervous in a confident way.
Yeah.
You could just go, wow, this is a big room.
Yeah, there's a way of saying it, definitely.
It's
own it, but
I don't know if it comes down to like sales techniques, being a salesperson, because it's engaging with someone or something is what I find. Like when I used to work on shows, there was a lot of where we'd have like a clothing stand, and there'd be, I don't know, 20,000 people at the NEC. And you've got to get this person to get them from the side into, and then engage with them to take something that you've made to be able to make a sale. And I would find that there was always something that was important to someone. And you could tell, like with trainers, I'm a big sneakerhead. I love trainers, and I can tell what's good and what's not good. And I can tell if someone's wearing something, it means a lot to them, especially a high-end type of thing. So I could immediately engage it. Oh, sick kicks, man. And before you know that, well, yeah, actually. And because you've got them on side, I'm not saying that you're lying to them, but it's the same when I'm talking to an audience, that I can feel I'm trying to pick out bits that I can sort of relate to. Because what I found was I did a lot of school talks, like you've done school talks, and I did it with a company I was working with, because he didn't do very well in school and I didn't do very well in school, but here we are now. And it was more a case of we were telling the same sort of story over and over again. And we went to one specific school, and there was 5 kids, lads, that were being arseholes. But that would have been me, 1,000,000%. So my focus, once I'd told my story, the teachers came to me and were like, yo, we're really sorry. And I was like, well, no, where are they? And they're like, what? I said, where are they? And they went, Bill, they're in the office. I was like, cool, let's go. I'm like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, these are the hardest ones to get through to. These are the hardest ones to engage with.
Here, really.
I need to sit down with these lads. And it sort of taught me more for the next show, because I wanted to understand, like, all right, so which bit did you turn off at? And they're like, oh, well, you said. I'm like, okay. And then what was the next? When you were laughing and then he punched you, what were you completely disengaged, or was he punching you from something I said? He's like, oh, no, actually, yeah. It was all right. And I sort of sat with them for like an hour. And it gave me so much, so that I knew that I could try and engage with the troubled people before the easy listeners. And it put me at ease, because I thought, I'm here to do a job. And I've massively failed if I've missed the key demographic that I'm representing. And I think it shocked the teachers more than anything, because they were like, well, why do you want to take time out with these ones that we've already given up on? And I'm like, that's the fucking point, man.
Yeah, that's why they're behaving like that, because you've given up on them.
Precisely. And obviously, I mean, you've taught me that a lot throughout the past few years, but it's, everyone's important. Everyone's position is important. But I think the minute that you like turn that down or just negate that, why would you expect him to listen? But we had a wicked chat, and like 2 of the lads, I think it was about 2 or 3 years later, I got a call from the guidance counsellor, and he was telling me how well what they'd done and what they were. Oh, wow. And they were hustlers. They weren't academically good, but like, it was stupid. But we were talking about buying and selling stuff to build your portfolio, to be able to, that you can't just get a shop, but like you can wheel and deal, and went down the Del Boy route, and they were smashing it legally. They were nailing it, and it was such a good feeling. I'd done probably, I don't know, 50 school talks, but the most important ones were these 5 retrobates that essentially then they went, all right, nice one, cheers, dude, you helped me out.
Yeah, similar experience.
That whole thing about feeling nervous, a couple of examples that might help. So I think many people view Winston Churchill as one of the greatest speakers this country's ever produced. Early in his parliamentary career, he stood up to make a speech and lost his thread partway through and had to sit down, and he was kind of laughed at. And so ever afterwards that he scripted all of his speeches very carefully. So those great wartime speeches, we will fight them on the beaches and all that stuff, he was up all night practicing in front of the mirror. That was the way he dealt with the nerves. So he looked in complete command. It was the preparation that allowed him to produce that.
Yeah.
Or you take another British Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan, who was Prime Minister in the late 50s, early 60s. People called him Super Mac, and he was reckoned to be the most laid-back, coolest Prime Minister this country had ever had. He was an image of the Edwardian gentleman going for a shoot on a grouse moor. You know, he just looked so in control. But before giving major speeches to Conservative Party conference, he used to be physically sick. Now, it's the easiest audience a Conservative Prime Minister could ever address would be a 1950s Conservative Party conference. They were never going to give him a hard time. But he was terrified, but no one ever knew it.
Yeah.
So the whole thing, people can't tell what you're feeling. And that's really, I think it's one of the most helpful things to learn is if you can contain that within, you can actually mobilise it. You want to welcome the nerves and say, yeah, I'm going to weaponise these now. I'm going to use them to deliver.
It's your butterfly analogy, isn't it?
I love it. I was just thinking, I must have said it on every podcast, but it is having butterflies. It's just teaching them how to fly in formation.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest thing. Like, both of my kids can be nervous about certain things. And the whole nerves, it just baffles me because I'm not. And I've had to learn to take a step back and slow down. It's like when we're away and we're trying to feed elephants and my youngest is freaking out, thinking, you're never going to get to do this again. And the more pressure that's going on top of her, she's like, well, just leave it then.
Yeah.
And I think, well, that's definitely not the answer.
Yeah.
So then you kind of ignore it. And then the thing is, it's like you were saying, that the prep is the best thing. And it probably is for most people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then for some people, the prep is the worst thing. But it's finding
what works for you.
Yeah, for real, like the good bottle of wine. The good bottle of wines won't taste good.
Yeah.
And it's perfect because we're kind of conditioned that it's got to be academic. It's got to be perfect. It's got to be this. It's like, actually, no. Do you know what? Sometimes a different approach can work. And it's down to how you feel. Like, sometimes it's don't let people know what's behind the curtain because you look unprofessional. Other times, take the curtain all the way back because you need them to see, it's the first time I'm ever doing this. I'm probably not going to do it again. You wouldn't do it, so give me a break. And it's whatever.
Nuanced.
Yeah, whatever it takes. But it's something that, I mean, you've told me this a million times that time just doesn't wait for anyone. And by this time tomorrow or this time in an hour, it's done. It's finished. It's yesterday.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much you can cram into that time, but the more you put it off or the more you don't do it, you'll never know. And it's like, I've had friends in the past that have really struggled, and I've spoke to them about, look, it's not about how you overtake, it's when you're going to overtake.
Yeah.
Just you've got to do it. And then they did it, and they're like, oh my God, it's the best thing I ever did. And I'm like, cool, you're going to do it again? It's like, no, never, but I hold it so dearly because it means so much to me. I'm like, cool, that's wicked.
I suppose my top things that I've learned by doing it, and I've probably done about, 500 now, because I had a year of just every other day was a gig. And I love learning audiences in different types. I remember I took my energy where I was going into loads of primary schools for a long time into a secondary school. That didn't work. No. I learned very quickly, but it's about that. There's no such thing as failure, only feedback. You've got to be prepared for those moments. You've got to go, oh, what have I learned from this then? Okay, I'm going to go more into the heavy stuff quicker on rather than trying to do beatboxing and play with them.
Yeah.
But the beatboxing for me was fun because I do that with now primary schools I'll do it with because they find it really fun. And I'll do beatboxing with teachers and head teachers because they've got past that I need to be cool stage.
Yeah.
So they'll join in, and for me that got the laughs out because everyone realises it's really hard to do, and then I can do something that they really can't do.
Yeah.
And then it just separates that then and diffuses it. Another thing I learned was nerves of the respect that you pay the audience. That was that lightened my load. I was like, oh, the reason I'm nervous is because I genuinely want them to have a good time out of this.
Yeah.
And when I reprogrammed that and I thought about it, I went on with that energy. What's the best thing I could provide here? But I love what you said about practice, because when I've gone on stages for myself and my lived experience, just sort of going through life and then realise, oh no, the end of this week I've got my talk. I've not thought about it for however long. It's sort of that really got me nervous. But when I'd had 2-3 weeks ready for it, that was amazing sort of process toward it. So
Yeah.
that can lighten your load on the way there.
Yeah, particularly if there's an objective that you're trying to, if you're just trying to entertain,
Yeah.
which is mostly when you're giving talks, you're trying to entertain, Owen, with respect. But if it's like when I was giving a sermon, I'd be trying to get across a theological point. Yeah. So there has to be a cogent argument behind it. Yeah. And sometimes with biblical references, so you couldn't just wing it.
Yeah.
And then I went to Shardlow Church to take a service there, and they told me that they did a sung liturgy. So I had to start with the "Dearly beloved, we are gathered." I'd never done that before.
Yeah,
but just went for it, and I think, well, I'm only coming here once; they won't have me back.
This is it.
But the other thing is, like that time when you were worried about the audience turning on you.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, the audience are willing you to do well.
They want you to have a good time themselves, don't they?
Well, but it's just really uncomfortable seeing someone die on their arms.
Yeah, but also how many really stale, boring keynotes have they seen before?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, not another one.
Yeah.
So really, they're there to go, I hope this is actually a bit fresh and a bit fun this time.
Yeah.
And then when they get those, it's like, oh, thank God. So.
But if it does start off a little bit badly, if your opening joke lands wrongly or you've misjudged your audience, that you just hit the wrong colour gag.
Yeah.
Then if you go on the back foot,
it
can turn into a bloodbath.
Yeah.
So it's like whatever happens, get on the front foot. Ride it out, style it out, and move on.
Yeah.
Because particularly with kids, I just remember back at school, if you got some supply teacher coming in, and, kids would just tear them to pieces.
Yeah, because you can smell it.
Yeah.
I remember I was doing a poetry event, but it was at a festival in Leeds, and it went poet, comedian in between sets, and it's my audience, so I actually hated it eventually, just preaching to the converted all the time.
Yeah.
I'm going to say loads of stuff they love, I know they're on board, but it was a nice moment. But we're in this quite hippie festival, and there must have been about 100 people there, and then I'd performed and it went really well, lovely set, and then this comedian came on, and he was doing all animal abuse jokes and stuff to these hippies.
Okay.
Most of them vegan.
Yeah.
And I was just like, dude, in the first joke went awful, and somebody said, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
And then he tried so hard for about 3 minutes to get them back, and then just went, I'm going, guys, I'm sorry. And I really want to know if that guy ever got on a stage again, because that would have moved some people. But yeah, just know your audience. That is sometimes helpful, who's in front of you, and what sort of energy would be used to putting out, because I've also been a bit stubborn I've got this set list now for my poetry, for example, and I've gone into venues thinking, that's daft. You could put this energy about it, and it brought a much better gig. So I think sometimes
being ready to scrap the plan,
yeah.
And the preparation is, it was the 6P principle of perfect preparation prevents piss poor performance. But sometimes just throw it away.
Yeah, he should have
thrown
it away. Yeah. There's no way. So I went and punched this dog in the face, and you're like, no.
Yeah.
You're gonna die.
It may be he had.
It
may be he had no other material.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but his plan could have been, I'm not going to go up. Just in that instance, I wouldn't have for him.
But talking about disasters and bloodbaths may not be helpful for any of our listeners who are looking for ways of overcoming the fear. But
maybe it would.
Well, no, but also I think we need to look at it when it's working well.
Yeah.
It's a great feeling.
Oh, mate, it's the best.
Yeah,
it's the best to get off a stage, and or any time you've done it. Like walking outside a funeral home and stood there with my family, and every single person shook my hand. I'm thinking, I don't even know you.
Yeah.
But I've brought back to life something that they'd long forgotten, or I've reminded them of something that meant something so much to them. And then before you know it, it's the same as when you're on a stage. If you've acted, or if you've delivered a speech, or whatever it is, the fact that it resonates with someone and they come up and they want to talk to you, and you're like, all right, I was just doing what I was meant to do. And it's like, especially in schools with kids, you see a massive reaction, and it is the best feeling, delivering a best man speech to someone that you love so much, and then just seeing their whole family are they're now part of the inner circle. They now know the inside joke. So when I nearly smashed my way through into someone's loft bedroom because we were trying to feed a cable through, and Sam's underneath going, just smash it, the wall in the loft, and I'm hitting it, and like it's knocking the screws out of the studded wall into this girl's bedroom. and I'm like, yeah, just smash it. And then eventually we went down and I looked, and he was like, why have you done that, you idiot? And I'm like, because you said smash it. But obviously this was just, it's all these little experiences, because then they'll normally let you know a story that they know that you don't, or there'll be an experience.
I'll just before we do go on from the don't perform to bloodbaths thing, I think it's not bad advice, actually, because the thing with my poetry, when I was first going on a stage in front of people, the thing that really helped, and people have this opportunity now, if you want to go into public speaking, poetry is great because you only have to say a verse and you can go. Yeah. And if you say something nice, you're often going to get a massive cheer. And then you're running off that energy, because down the line, I performed at a place, I won't name them, but I do a poem called Is Immigration Killing the Nation? Don't worry, it's not. And I performed that poem in probably 3-4 months into doing poetry.
Was this your BNP gig that you doing?
No, I was saying they're good guys. But I performed it in a room with BNP people in it, right, and I got punched in the face at the end of it. And
good. I mean, in the best possible way.
But it ended up in a brawl. A guy said, "That's I don't agree with any of that," and then I said, that's fine, that's your opinion. Yeah. And then by the end of the night, he'd had a few, and then he boshed me one. But if I hadn't have had all the love and all the moments of glory and, mate, you're insanely good at that. That's where you belong on that stage, and all them people telling me that. Yeah. If that was my first experience, I wouldn't be on stages to this day, I don't
quite
feel.
Possibly.
I think the fact that I found poetry, I found a really nice crowd and a nice environment to be in, that really got me the momentum to be who I am today. Yeah. So find good crowds and good people, I think, to start with.
But sometimes it's whatever you land yourself with. Yeah. It's that whole, it is a sink or swim moment.
Yeah, you do have to swim.
There's a transition from never having done public speaking to having done public speaking. Yeah. And that's the hardest step for people to take. Those people that didn't want to do the best man speech, they'd never done anything, and they thought, I can't do it. If they'd have done it, they could have done it again.
Of course.
It's that taking that step. Because they say the people there, they want you to succeed, particularly in something like a wedding. Yeah. That's the most forgiving crowd you could ever play. Yeah.
Another good step is just get your phone or get an iPad or something, perform to that, and put it out there on social media. Because when you see a few views, like my views were starting to go up, and I was doing a weekly Tuesday thoughts, but the views and then comments, and that can add to your fuel as well. Yeah. I found that really helped me, because I had to start learning about memorising stuff and screwing up and so on, and that was a good tactic too. So that would be a good step into starting to public speak, I think. Yeah.
Speaking at the right volume as well is also important.
Because you can get it wrong.
You can. Yeah. But I mean, when I was somewhere where I was mic'd up, I would always try to listen for my voice bouncing off the back of the room. If I could just hear that, then everybody in the room could hear me.
That's true. Yeah.
Whereas because it's deadly, isn't it? What did he say?
Oh, there's nothing worse than listening to somebody that's whispering. When you're
straining.
Yeah. Or you've got Brian Blessed up there,
screaming it.
Yeah.
Especially into a microphone.
Yeah.
Normal Brian Blessed, I can live with all day. Yeah. Into a microphone, it's like, bro. Yeah. Have a word with yourself. I think I've just had a thought now, and I think that my confidence, just going back to your original point, it's actually reminding me something you said earlier. It was my mum. My mum was doing a eulogy for my grandma, and she said she was nervous, but she says no one else can do this, so I've got to do it. And I think growing up, we didn't have a I can't do it option. Yeah. I'm not saying that you have to force your kids, but obviously the growing up is a lot different now to what it was. Yeah. And to what it was before that, and before that we've had waves of it just getting a little bit better and a little bit better. But I didn't have the option. Like, I didn't have the option to leave my dinner. I didn't have the option to not try. I didn't have and there was never, ever, ever the get out of jail card for anything. So I think ultimately, I did a lot of theatre school as a kid. My mum ran a theatre group.
I was going to suggest that.
So I was always not just always performing, but it was like, even if there was 10 groups and it was like, right, we'll watch everyone's before we go home. and you're doing it to the rest of the group. But there was never a time when it was okay to not do it. And I'm not saying that's exactly the way that you have to go and force your kids to do it so they can public speak. But I think it served me really quite... Like, academically, I'm terrible. So many things I'm awful at. But my attributes that have been, like, saved as points, if you like, I've been able to put on other areas so I can at least fall back on that.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that I didn't have the opportunity to not do it was better than it being excused. Does that make any sort of sense? And like I say, I'm not telling people how to raise their kids, or you can't not let them do it.
But it's not dissimilar to what you talked about Stacey's fear of spiders, not transmitting it to the kids.
Yeah.
And again, not transmitting your anxiety to your kids. I mean, my dad used to do public speaking, and he used to quite enjoy doing it. When the daughter got married, he did the father's speech because the guy felt he couldn't do it himself. And he, just as your dad said to you, my dad said to me, "Meckham, have your kid."
Yeah.
Because it is great advice.
Yeah, it is. I love that. I literally use that on stages today. Just that, let them have your kid.
Yeah.
I'll say it.
It means
God
more
knows,
to me
you
than
must have said
nearly
that on
anything.
the first episode.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Well, episode 1 or 2. And
it's
I'm like,
so important because what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
Like you say, even if you die in your arse, the same people are going to come up to you afterwards to talk to you about it. You're still going to have people come up to you and go, "Can't believe that happened, mate." And you go, "I know, what can you do?"
But as you're scanning across an audience, and they're listening, and they're paying attention to what you're saying, and you feel the connect, and then you move, because you're not spending the whole time looking at one person, but neither are you looking down. You are connecting, and it's one of the best feelings there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say definitely some of the most powerful energy I've ever been in is when you're on a stage and they are in the palm of your hand and you can feel it, and then it's whatever you say next, you can be really timed with your words. If you had like a 5-second pause, they'd be with you because you've won them, and that's so powerful. It's beautiful.
It's building a story as well.
Yeah.
I think there's a massive art in being able to tell a story and engage, even because you're essentially painting the picture for the people. So, I mean, my daughter at the minute, it's brain aching because she'll try and tell you something. She'll shout, "Dad," "Yeah." "Dad," "Yes, darling." 10 minutes later, "Dad," I'm like, "I've said yes 3 times." And then she go, "At school," and then there was this. What was I saying? I'm like, "What are you doing?" And because my fuse is obviously non-existent now, being a dad, it's just I'm trying to get her to understand. Like there's a beginning.
So you're saying you're a good talker but not a good listener?
Exactly that. Exactly that. And I think it's because I've just for years I've got a very big family, and my uncles, they were always dirty stories, and they were always amazing, and they were always really rude. But my Uncle Patrick, my Uncle Tony, they could tell the best stories about nothing. Literally nothing, but they would tell it, and you were hanging off every word. And as much as I don't see them that much now, but I can still remember how they got you to this crescendo that was the biggest. There was you could never guess it, and it wasn't like an obvious punchline. It was always such an engaging story, and I think there's so many elements that you can paint for people to keep them engaged that they can relate to. Because even if they don't relate to the very beginning, there might be an element that you've put in the middle about, I don't know, the place you were, or the skyline, or the car you were in, or the struggle you had with the chip paper that fell down do you know what I mean, before you job into whatever it was. But the bits that will engage, you eventually grab every single person, and before you get to the end, you've got this beautiful moment, like you say, where everyone's just looking at you like, "Go on then, tell us." And I mean, the whole thing is what things like TikTok and Instagram are based off now, because it's all cliffhangers. Every single video that you look at is never the full story. There's always a part 1 or some bullshit that just keeps you hooked in to try and get you to look at the next thing. But it shows you how important the build of the story is. But just give them the bit at the end.
Yeah.
And for me, that's gold.
And keep your mind on the message. So you look at what you're talking. So if someone has maybe someone's got a technical position, they've got to give a talk to people at work about a technical issue. People don't want to know everything that you know. They just want to know that you know it.
Yeah.
So just give them the facts that they need, not all the background that justifies it.
Yeah.
Unless you're giving a paper where you've got to justify the opinion that you're giving, but focus on the message.
And always learn from whatever you've done. Just think about, how could I said that more concise, or how could I trim the fat in that area, and just keep building in that way, I think.
Yeah.
And the last thing that I used to do when I was nervous was move about loads, and I think that was just nervous energy being spilled over the place. But
It's whatever works for you. Again,
yeah,
some people, I'm quite happy to just stick at the podium,
yeah.
but other people, they've got to move. That's the way it works.
But I think for me and my experience as an audience member, when I see somebody all over the place and my eyes are there, it can just lose a little bit of what they're saying. So just be maybe just mindful of it. Be grounded. If you want to move, but don't be too scattish and too all over the place.
And I think that people, there's something in a communal experience. So an audience is experiencing something differently to somebody watching a video on YouTube.
Definitely.
Because there's something about the vibe about being in a group, and the little snigger here starts a little chain reaction.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of a group emotional response going on, and that you can feed off that, and they can feed off that. So again, you might practice something, to your wife, and she goes, yeah, but it might have a very different response to a whole crowd.
One other thing I would say as well,
and a good one today.
I'm not saying I never get nervous. I can't say that, because obviously there's always a concern, or there's always a thought in your head, or whatever it is. But I tell my daughter, just tell it to fuck off. I know she's only 11, but she kind of gets that, and she because she knows I'm not meant to say that. She knows that that's serious, so she'll be in a hunch. But the thing that I think makes me more nervous than anything is holding a microphone. I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of holding a microphone. Yeah. And it threw me the first time it happened.
Because you're a bit of an arm waver, aren't you?
Yeah.
So holding a plate in one position is difficult.
And I know I'm loud enough that you can hear me at the other end of the football field. So it kind of felt silly that I had it. And also, I don't know what I'm doing with this, because I'm explaining and I'm building this whole story with every action I've got. Yeah. So if you are going to do a speech, or if you are going to talk publicly, and you know there's going to be a microphone, get that stupid feeling out of your head with a hairbrush or whatever it is, because as much as you're going to feel like an idiot on the day, you've already knocked that on the head, because you've been holding, I don't know, a kid's microphone or whatever it is. But it's such an alien thing to someone that speaks with their hands, to put something into that hand has to stay still and that close to your mouth. You're like, all right, well, now
where does this arm do?
you're kind of killing me, because it's like when you see people public speak with their hands in their pocket. What's going on, dude?
That's not great body language.
No, and that's exactly. But we pick up on that organically nowadays. Yeah. Because we've learned to understand. Like you were just talking about someone all over the stage. All I can see is Lee Evans.
Yeah.
Which is obviously it's comedy. It's different, but it that's fine for him, because if he stood still, you'd feel cheated out your 100%. Ticket money.
Yeah.
But the difference is it's making yourself comfortable in the uncomfort.
I think he has intention.
Jack D doing a Lee Evans would not work, would it?
Could you imagine?
You find your style, don't you, on that stage?
Interesting, just a little aside there with Jack D. He spent years trying to make it. It wouldn't work. And he decided to give up comedy. So on his very last gig, which he contracted to do, he just went in and just went really miserable with it. And he killed it.
Yeah.
And he accidentally found what worked for him.
Yeah. But
I was just... My main thing with all that and what Wood said is actually going off script as well is amazing, because some of my best bits came from outside the script and they ended the way into the script. So having a script's fantastic, but if you're feeling that energy and you're really excited about it, and then you think, do you know what, they are in the palm of my hand now and I feel I can say this thing, go down that path a little bit sometimes can really help, because I've had some of my favourite anecdotes that I tell to this day because I just went off this weird path that I'd not thought of.
Yeah, so be alive. Okay, so I think we've covered this, hopefully in a useful way for you today. We're not particularly paralysed by fear, but it does grip us occasionally. But don't fear the fear. Like in so many things, it's the fear of the fear that gets you. And the only way to do it is to just do it. Just fucking do it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
JTFI. Just fucking do it.